right. Okay, well, I'll give you a second to get set up.
Minutes on the clock?
Yep.
Yeah.
Alright, whenever y'all ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
Judge?
Yep.
I'd like to start off by thanking you all for coming out today. Pro this weekend has been very enjoyable. My name is CJ Parrish, and I represent the affirmative on the resolution resolved. The U.S.'s hegemony will end with Trump. Now I want to clarify a few things about this because it's a fairly lifty and weighty resolution. Obviously, the United States government is what we're talking about, the U.S. Hegemony in this round is going to be defined as leadership or dominance, especially by one country over another. So what I'm going to show in this round through my case is that based on Trump's current, past, and proposed international politics, what we're going to see is that we are no longer going to be the dominant force in international politics, whether it be economically, politically, militarily speaking. We are not going to have anywhere near as much influence as we have currently. Other countries such as China, BRICS as a whole, Russia will start to creep in and take over the power that we are going to leave behind. To end means to come to a final point. And in the context of today's round, what I'm demonstrating is that our current stretch of hegemony is going to end. Now we can look back to World War I and we see we've lost our hegemony before. After World War I we went isolationist, but I'll get into that more in my speech. But the point I'm making here is that I'm not saying we will never get it back. The United States is just going to collapse and we'll never gain any international power again. What I'm demonstrating is that in the Trump administration, we will not be the dominant force. We will end our reign of hegemonic control over the world. And then to clarify with Trump, that's referring to his term, 4 years, hopefully not 8, they're trying to push it to 8, but if it ends up being 8 years, that would be in the scope of this topic. Just the Trump administration for the next 4 years, we are going to see this happen. And the weighing mechanism is going to be on balance. We're going to weigh the evidence on both sides because we are predicting the future. It's not a perfect science to do so, so the evidence both sides, whichever you find more convincing, will win today's round. And my first argument is going to be political influence. And now I mentioned World War I want to tie into that. After World War I, according to the Norwich Center for Reserve Libraries, the Norwich University Resource Library, they found that post-World War I, we had extreme isolation by 3 key points. 1, leaving international organizations. 2, tariffs. And 3, immigration quotas. And we see essentially all of these same things under Trump. We see that he's leaving international organizations. In his first term, he immediately left the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This term, he's already left the World Health Organization. He's threatening to leave NATO. He has abandoned the Paris Climate Accords that we signed. He abandoned any Green New Deal initiatives we had internationally. So we're already leaving international organizations. We're already seeing a 25% tariff. Literally, an hour ago, he announced a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada and a 10% increase in tariffs on China. And on immigration quotas, we've already seen mass deportations start to occur, and he has just announced he wants to build a 30,000 migrant facility in Guantanamo Bay. So what we see is that he is repeating the playbook of 1917 and onward that we had internationally speaking. What did we see during that time period? Well, we saw Hitler grow uncontested in Europe. The United States did nothing. In fact, we passed multiple neutrality acts saying we will not get involved. We want nothing to do with it. We stayed out of it as long as we possibly could until 1941. We were forcibly dragged back into it. What we're going to see here in these next 4 years is that we're just going to stop having influence, mostly because we're not going to try to exert it. We're just going to essentially say United States first. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad policy. What I'm saying is having isolationist policies, by definition, makes your dominance over other countries go away because you're so focused on insulating your economy and your politics. My second argument is tech development. China is beating us in tech development, and that's going to give them hegemonic control over the future. What we see just recently, as explained by AP News, a new AI called DeepSec, which was developed for pennies on the dollar compared to ChatGPT and other US alternatives, was released online for free. And it outperformed ChatGPT in almost every single way. The ChatGPT version that cost $200 a month to subscribe to was outperformed by an open source AI. What we're seeing is that this tanked the US economy because a lot of the US economy, whether it's NVIDIA, Apple, Meta, the big tech stocks that keep us afloat, all are hinging on AI being profitable. And the second we see somebody do it for a whole lot cheaper, for free basically, and developing it on worse technology than we have, that killed our economies. What we're seeing is we're behind in the AI race. We're behind when it comes to the data collection race with Chinese AI beating us, but also TikTok. We're also behind in electric vehicles, which is why we have a 100% tariff on Chinese EV right now. So we see is tech-wise, China's going to beat us to the future. And that goes to my third argument, respect. At a fundamental level, the world does not respect Trump. As explained by a new study done by a visual capitalist, where they kind of did an evaluation of approval ratings for Trump in different countries, I'm going to give you a list of the countries who like him. India, China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Russia. They have a positive approval rating of Trump. Whereas the countries that have a very negative approval rating, the EU entirely, Great Britain, UK, Ukraine, South Korea, our allies don't like Trump. They're not going to work with him as effectively. Our enemies love Trump because of his isolationist policies. We are not a respected country, so therefore our dominance will be removed.
Cross X. Judge, cross X.
Yep.
Okay. 2 minutes opening?
Mhm.
2 minutes. Judge? Ready? Okay, so. Well, thank you for such a wonderful speech. Thank you, Judge, for being here. So I'd like to start by asking a couple of questions. With regards to your first contention, you mentioned political influence. You talked about extreme isolation, tariffs, and immigration quotas, right?
Yes.
Okay, so with regards to the immigration quotas that they were made, can you go a bit into, can you give more detail into the immigration quotas, tariffs, and immigration quotas and tariffs, please?
Yeah, so immigration quotas post-World War I, we limited the amount of people allowed to migrate to this country.
Okay.
We're taking that to the extreme under Trump and not limiting the amount of people who can migrate. We're just kicking thousands and thousands, and he's hoping for millions of them out of the country. And on tariffs, it's like they had a ton of tariffs to try to protect the U.S. economy during the Great Depression. Trump's doing the same thing. He established a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico.
Okay. 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 So, with regards to tech development, you mentioned DeepSeek. That DeepSeek was developed with pennies on a dollar. That's what you said, right?
Yes, their budget was in like the tens of millions, whereas
Okay.
ChatGPT and OpenAI have done like hundreds of billions.
Okay.
of dollars.
And what foundation was DeepSeek run on?
What foundation?
Yes.
I think they scalped a lot of data from ChatGPT. So what they've
Thank
done.
you. Just thank you for that. Just thank you for that. Okay. Okay. You also mentioned that U.S. has the worst tech with regards to electric vehicles. That U.S. is behind and China will beat us. But can you go more into that?
Yeah. So China is able to produce their electric vehicles at a significantly cheaper rate than the United States. And so the United States placed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles so that we can't buy it for cheap. They specifically recognize China as beating us because of government subsidies.
Okay, so you also mentioned the respect and approval ratings. Can you name the countries that respect Trump again and don't respect Trump?
So the countries that, like, from the study had a positive approval rating are India, China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Russia. And then the ones that it showed had a fairly negative one were all of the EU countries grouped into one: Great Britain, Ukraine, and South Korea.
Okay. Next speech. Open and ready? Judge ready?
Yes.
So, I like to begin my speech now. So, thank you, Judge, for being here. Thank you, Open, for such a wonderful speech. My name is Ephraim Mensah from LSUS, and I'm next on the topic, the U.S. hegemony will end with Trump. I agree with my opponent's definition of the various parts, as the U.S. hegemony and the Trump administration. I agree with all that. But, Judge, I'd like to go a bit more into what my opponent has said. My opponent in his statement says that the hegemony will end. And the reasons he gave was what? Extreme isolation, tariff, with one, he talked about political influence, where he talked about extreme isolation, tariffs, and what immigration quotas. And this is my response to that. With extreme isolation, Trump is not isolating the US extremely. Getting away from places that do not benefit you does not necessarily mean you are extremely isolating yourself. The president has taken a look, these organizations, the US is spending more money in regards to these organizations. We're not benefiting from them. In fact, we have economic problems. Why don't we step away and focus on ourselves? That's a reasonable thing to do. We talked about tariffs. Let's take note that Trump is placing tariffs not just because he wants to place tariffs, he's placing tariffs on countries that in the past, during the former president's time, Biden had high tariffs on the US, and the US people had to pay more for that. Trump is like, look, that's not fair. My people can be paying more for a product and your people will be paying less, so I'm going to put tariffs on you. That's the normal reaction. That's the way things are supposed to be. He's not putting tariffs to stop business. No, he's putting tariffs to place order. He's doing that for order's sake, so that his people will benefit. He's not saying, I'm going to place tariffs and not do business with you anymore. All Trump is asking for is what? Order. With regards to with Canada and China, other countries, and Mexico, Trump made it clear that, look, you have been benefiting for this long. France, you benefited from this long, and we have been losing. We are not going to lose anymore. We are going to put tariffs on you. And my source is from the business.org that says that Trump's tariffs have strategically placed the US at a position of influence, regaining its sense of hegemony. Because this brings me to the third contention that you talked about. Jack, let me skip and go to the third contention. Respect. Why would I respect somebody that has been taken advantage of for decades? If people are placing tariffs on US, increasing tariffs on the US, and US is not responding, and US is just paying money, why would they respect you? What about they say you're going to do it? Why do they respect you? You say no. Equality must be done. Order must be done. Will have a sense of respect for yourself in front of them. My opponent's second point was what? Immigration. Talked about what? Immigration quotas. Trump is not just deporting people. Judge, I am an immigrant. I'm a legal immigrant. I'm from Ghana, West Africa. I'm a legal immigrant. Trump does not seek to deport me. Trump wants to deport illegals, or let me use the word aliens, those who are unregistered. Because you can't just walk into a country and expect them to accept you. You have to go through a process of what? A background check. You have to apply with documents. You have to get a visa. In every country, you have to get a visa. But you can't just enter another country and say, yo, I'm into this country and you people should accept me. This is what Trump is against. He's deporting the aliens, the illegal people in the US, which makes sense, which in my country we will do. Mopin also talks about what? The issue of ChatGPT, of what? DeepSeek. During the cross-sex, if you remember, I asked him that what was DeepSeek run on? And in his own words, the foundation of ChatGPT. It's like building a model of a car, the first car being made, then another person comes and uses that same model as a foundation, makes a cheaper one and says, look, I did it cheaper. But which foundation did you use? The billions they had spent, you looked at it, looked at the errors and made a cheaper one. That doesn't mean you did better. Someone spent billions. You can't say you did better because you invented. No, you didn't invent. The Chinese didn't invent any new technology, any new AI or anything. It's based on the foundations of ChatGPT, which gives us the dominance. Also talked about what? The issue of what? Electrical vehicles and approval ratings. With regards to electrical vehicles, Tesla is one of the best, in fact, the best electrical vehicle ever made. Tesla's dominance cannot be disputed. The foundation for self-driving cars is given to Tesla. The world accepts it. From BMW to Volkswagen, it all came from Tesla. The foundation came from Tesla. Chinese electric vehicles is a what? In fact, Elon Musk so gracefully, after making the whole self-driving concept, electric vehicles, released it freely to the world, knowing that people would copy him, and in fact, in the end, he will have dominance, and the US will have what? Dominance and hegemony. We'll talk about what? Approval ratings. With regards to approval ratings, take note that the countries that you mentioned are countries that have been taking advantage of the US for long. Not superpower countries like India and China, who understand the importance of what? Having proper relations with what? The country. Now, this brings me to my contentions, or my first contention for history. Throughout history, from the Bush administration, from the Bush 1 to Bush 2, Obama, Trump, Biden, and Trump now, we can see that the US has had a consistency of what? Hegemony. It won't stop, it won't end. And the dominance won't stop, because if you look at what Trump is doing, Trump is the only president who could tell Russia that, look, Russia-Ukraine war must end. And the president of Russia was like, okay, fine, we're going to end it. If people don't respect him, would that have happened? Why didn't that happen during Biden's time? Exactly not. And why won't Trump end? Trump won't end this hegemony because, one, he's going to promote it because he's banning the selling of what? NVIDIA chips, that's high-tech AI chips, to what? Other countries, because he wants to be the one in control. And he doesn't want to give America's technology out to people because he wants to control, promoting what? The issue of hegemony, also placing tariffs on other countries. With this, I believe the round should be voted in favor of the name. Thank you.
All right, 2 minutes of cross-examination. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Great speech as always. Just have a few questions to clear some things up. So I want to talk a bit about talking about political influence. You mentioned that Trump is putting tariffs on places that already tariffed us. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so like Canada and Mexico, are you saying they had like a substantial tariff on the United States?
Yes, and the US was losing as a result.
Okay,
so to make it fair, he just told them that look, either you reduce your tariffs, you place on us, or I'm going to increase mine, which makes sense because the US came in a position of losing.
So when the United States was a part of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, there were no tariffs, right?
For that I can't tell.
Okay, well, are you aware that Trump himself in his first term ended the NAFTA agreement?
Of course, because he realized that it was of no benefit to the US.
Okay, and by ending the NAFTA agreement, he allowed Mexico and Canada to place tariffs on us.
Not necessarily. Tariffs existed before Trump came into office.
Okay, and talk a little bit about Tesla and like the EVs. So in terms of Tesla sales being the worst they've ever been, declining constantly, and having the worst ratio of sales to actual stock value, how is Tesla like the world's leading EV producer?
The foundation of self-driving cars that the Chinese is bringing is what? Based on Tesla. The foundation of the electric vehicles is based on Tesla. The fact that Tesla is having a shortfall during this period doesn't mean they are continuously going to have a shortfall. Companies have shortfalls within them. Sometimes the stocks go down, news comes out, the stock go down, but they do rebound. In fact, get better, the stock price goes up.
Okay. I want to talk a bit about that foundation point. So if somebody rips off the foundation of ChatGPT, offers a better performing version for cheaper, aren't people more likely to pay for the one, not pay for the free version than pay $200 a month?
Not necessarily.
So you think that people are going to pay more for a worse version of a product?
Well, ChatGPT is not a worse version of DeepSeek.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you. Okay. Everybody ready?
6 minutes?
3.
Thank you so much.
3 minutes.
3, yeah.
If you want to give me 6 minutes, I'll take 6 minutes, but.
3, yeah.
So in this speech, just a brief roadmap, the primary analysis in that last speech was mostly on my case. I'm going to focus on that, and I'll touch a little bit on the history point my opponent brought up. So going into my first argument, this idea of political influence, there's a few key things we have to clear up. One, when it comes to Trump only attacking illegal immigration, that is patently false. Trump has placed a freeze on asylum seekers in the United States, which is a form of legal migration, and Trump has also consistently fought against H-1B visas. He has also tried to end birthright citizenship, which is a form of legal migration for newborn children in the United States. So we see that Trump is trying to restrict legal migration. Furthermore, the point of that is, it's not whether or not his policy is inherently good or bad. What it demonstrates is that by putting illegal immigrants and deporting them to other countries, like Venezuela, who actively refused to take those immigrants, we're losing influence because Venezuela is basically saying, like, no, we don't want to do that. And I compared it to World War I, we did the same thing, we lost influence. On the point of tariffs, again, my opponent is missing the point that the only reason that the United States had tariffs with Mexico and Canada is because Trump ended NAFTA. Trump ended the free trade agreement that banned those countries from putting tariffs on us. You cannot create the problem and then say, look at me, I found a worse solution than the problem originally was. That is not a solve. What we see here is that whether or not tariffs are good or bad is not the dispute. Tariffs inherently attempt to bring U.S. jobs back to the U.S. economy, and it attempts to insulate our economy. That is the point of tariffs. It's trying to promote domestic manufacturing instead of international trade. Whether that's good or bad is not the debate. The question is, does that allow us to have influence? And by definition, it does not. It retreats our economy. It did post-World War I. On my second argument of tech, my opponent, again, is misrepresenting my evidence. I demonstrate that not only is DeepSeek free, open source, completely free compared to a $200 alternative, it performs better in many categories, such as English, math, multiple graduate level research categories. When they went testing, it performs better on the LSAT. It performed better across the board because it's not just GPT resold as a Chinese alternative. They made edits. They spent about $60 million of research to fine-tune it, and they released it for free. So what we're seeing is that people, as much as my opponent suggests otherwise, are not going to pay $200 a month when the free version already exists. We've already seen the United States when TikTok was banned. They all switched to Red Note, a blatantly censored communist app in China just out of spite of the United States. They're not afraid of using cheap Chinese alternatives. And when it comes to electric vehicles, Tesla is not the dominant. You heard it in CrossX. They have declining sales across the board, constant customer complaints. They have failed deliveries, manufacturing issues. I can go on and on about how Tesla being tied, its stock value being tied to Twitter's debt is also inherently bad. Tesla's not the dominant force in EVs. That's why we have 100% tariff on EVs. And finally, my third point of respect. My opponent's only analysis here is that Mexico and Canada didn't respect us, so why should we respect them back? It's not whether or not we want to engage in this war. If his philosophy is, oh, they don't respect us, so I'm not going to respect them, that's isolation. That's saying, I'm not going to deal with you anymore, go away. And on the point of history, we've already addressed it with World War I. Historically speaking, we lost our hegemony when we did this exact same thing. We're doing it again.
Judge, ready? Opponent, ready? Okay. Thank you, Opponent, for such a wonderful speech, but I have a few things to say concerning that. So, Judge, let's start with what my opponent said. He said that banning NAFTA meant the introduction of tariffs. Not necessarily. That's not necessarily. Mexico had a choice that, okay, fine, the agreement is ended, but since we've had this relationship over decades for years, let's continue it without any formalized agreement. Mexico had a choice, Canada had a choice, but they chose tariffs. And if you've chosen tariffs, USA can't be on the losing side if Trump introduced tariffs. The introduction of tariffs, dear Judge, is not going to put the US hegemony to an end. Take note, he said NAFTA. Apart from NAFTA, let's say NAFTA was free trade. What about the other countries, China? Do we have free trade with China? No. Has the US relationship with the US-China relationship ended just because we increased tariffs? No. It's still existing. So what shows that introducing tariffs on Mexico or Mexico and other countries is going to end the US hegemony? In fact, it's won't, but rather increase the US hegemony. My opponent also mentioned the fact that Trump is after H-1B visas. He is not, because Trump in his statement before and after coming to power made known that the US needs what? Highly skilled personnel. And in fact, one of his statements he made on CBS News was that the US cannot be losing highly skilled, trained personnel to other countries, because he noticed that what? Other people come from different parts of the world to the US, train, get the best skill, and go back to the country. Trump was like, no, we are going to give you, in fact, encourage that we get you green cards so that what? You stay here so that the knowledge you've gained benefits the US. How could you say something like that and try to end the visa that they would get? It doesn't add up. Also, my opponent also talked about the fact that the issue of DeepSeek, that DeepSeek is free. Judge, I've been using ChatGPT for over 2 years and I have no subscription thereof. And to serve me to the best of ability that a code with the free version I have. And I'm okay with it. ChatGPT has a free version. In fact, when ChatGPT was released to the world about 3 years ago, it was free. And people are like, wow, this is amazing. Because looking at how much response let me put this way, the artificial intelligence or machine learning could give, people were really enthralled about it because it was free and people could use it. DeepSeek is new. I respect that it's new, but let's take note. DeepSeek was built on the foundation of ChatGPT. And it is free. ChatGPT is also free. So you can't say you are better just because you are free as compared to others, which is the standard code, which is what? Free also. There's a paid version of ChatGPT, which I do agree, but a free version is also available to use for individuals like myself, which I'm using. Also mentioned the issue of declining sales. The fact that you have a declining sales in your quarter. iPhones are the most, the best performing phones in the world and have been sold for decades and keep breaking records. But there are periods where iPhones sales go down. Does it mean that the iPhone is the worst phone in history, or iPhone's hegemony or iPhone's dominance over the market is what is ending or has ended? No. Businesses have down moments. Businesses have moments where their stock markets go down. My opponent also mentioned the fact that mentioned the issue about Twitter. Let me say to concern Twitter. Twitter has nothing to do with this debate, or should be discarded. He also mentioned the fact that the introduction of tariffs and withdrawal from groups and immigration quotas is a repetition of what happened previously. But my response to that is, doing what happened previously, doing then, under those circumstances, doesn't necessarily mean those events will happen now. because different circumstances, the GDP of the US back then in the 1990s is different now. In fact, US has over 3 companies, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, that worth over $1 trillion. 50 years ago, no company was ever worth that amount. Will we say that because they are doing the same thing, you are going to experience the same, these companies are going to collapse? Exactly not, because there are different circumstances happening in this situation. With my points, Judge, I would like to give my voters. My first voter is drop points. My opponent failed. My opponent failed to address what? My opponent spent the entire of his time addressing what? The things I said about his contention, and failed to address my entire case about what happened in the past with what? The previous president, Bush 1, Bush 2, with Clinton, with Trump and Biden. He failed to address that completely. He dropped my first contention. He also failed to address what my second contention, which talked about why it won't end during Trump's term, that what Trump is banning the selling of high-end Nvidia chips to what? China. He failed to address that. And if my opponent decides to address these things, that I don't have the opportunity to come and speak about it, because this is what my last speech. My third voter is what? The US hegemony will not end, because Trump is the best leader and the world respects him due to his policies and decisions. So the grounds we voted in favor of the NEC. Thank you.
All right. One last speech. Are we all ready? Since it's my last time talking today, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. It's been a very fun round. I love talking about these deeper issues in politics. In this speech, I want to clarify very quickly a few things said in that last speech, and then just go into voting issues and help you feel comfortable signing your ballot for the affirmative as you leave today's round. Now, quickly on the issue of drop points, the first argument of history, realistically, we're debating 2 different things. I demonstrated through my historical evidence that these isolationist policies did lose us a hegemony across the board. We lost influence. We actually signed neutrality agreements, basically saying we're not going to get involved. We don't want influence. My opponent's only claims on history is that with no evidence that over the past 6 administrations we've just had it, and there's nothing for me to refute. There's no evidence. There's no real warrant or claim. It's just a blanket claim that we've had a hegemony. And on the second contention of Trump banning chips, I didn't hear that in the first speech. If it was there, it was 2 seconds at the very end of the timer. And so I didn't have anything to refute there either. But what I did refute was everything said about my case. So briefly onto some voting issues. The first voter is that this is not a question of good or bad. I think we've lost the plot ever so slightly here because we've gotten into a discussion of whether or not Trump's policies are righteous, whether they're good, whether they're beneficial for the United States. But that's not the discussion today. The question is, will the United States continue to be a dominant force in international politics? Will we have substantial influence? And if you look at every policy brought up today, tariffs, whether good or bad, by definition are saying we want to insulate ourselves from the international economy. We don't want to engage in as much international trade. We want to make it more expensive for our companies to order goods from other countries. That is the definition of tariffs. We see with immigration quotas, and my opponent did not respond to the fact that we put a freeze on asylum seeking. That is a legal form of immigration we're banning. And furthermore, we also are actively deporting thousands of people. And we saw that post-World War I. Whether it's good or bad, whether you disagree or agree with immigration policies, by definition, it is reducing our influence on the rest of the world because we're not letting them into our country. My second voter is going to be predictions in the future, specifically with tech. My opponent makes a good point. We have a lot of hyper-valued tech companies. But want to know what happened to those tech companies? As soon as DeepSeek was released, they all tanked in value. Nvidia alone tanked over $200 billion of value in one day, the greatest drop in stock market history because people are so scared that China is already beating us. They have another free version which outperforms the most expensive version of ChatGPT. Yes, there is a free version of ChatGPT, but it doesn't do as good as the free version that China is offering. They have a better product that even if the United States doesn't take, the rest of the world is. They have no obligation to ChatGPT. It's a US company. Everybody else could be like, okay, well, the more expensive, worse one or the free, better one, I'm going to take that. And that goes to my third voter, which is history. My opponent says just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it'll happen again. Well, without evidence otherwise, that's a very valid assumption to try and argue. What we're seeing is that in the past, we explicitly implemented tariffs, which by definition insulate the economy. We blocked immigration, by definition insulating our society, and we withdrew from organizations that give us influence. We withdrew from the World Health Organization, we withdrew from the TPP, we withdrew from the climate accords. By definition, we are losing influence. Vote out. Thank you. Don't forget to stop your recording. Good round.
Good round.
Done.